On today's podcast, we are going to be taking a look at some of the work trends for 2022 that were identified by Forbes and the Harvard Business Review and other future of work strategists. And not only are we going to look at the predictions and the trends that they had, but I'm going to provide my mid-year observations on these trends across industries and what we're seeing happening. So more to come on today's episode. Welcome back to The Thermostat with Jason Barger. If you're currently on a commute, a walk, or just a micro break in your day, glad you're making time to step back, to think, and to reflect on the next steps on your journey. I've never been more convinced the best leaders and team cultures in the world are the ones that make time to step back, breathe in good oxygen, and calibrate their thermostat. I hope today's conversation leaves you feeling grounded and inspired. Now let's dive into today's topic to engage our minds and hearts in order to authentically lead and create compelling cultures wherever we are in the world. Hey everyone, it's Jason and welcome back to the Thermostat Podcast. We are so glad that you are here and with us wherever you are, however you're coming to the show today. Thank you for tuning in. So glad you're here. I hope you're on like a great walk or a commute or something that's going somewhere exciting, or just carving out some time to step back from your work and just have some times to think to yourself wherever you are. Hope and glad that you are with us. So glad. Thanks to everybody who's been with the podcast for a long time and continues to come back and continues to be fueled by this. And so excited about the new people that are joining into the podcast and beginning this journey and feeling hopefully that it's contributing and valuable to your journey. So we're well over 125 episodes now, which is super exciting. And so many great topics and thought leaders have joined me on this, and so excited to continue the journey together. My commitment to everybody is that this is going to continue to be a place for you to step back, to take some time in your week to think, to be filled with some ideas and some thoughts about how you navigate your own life, your role as in your team, however you define that, and then also the culture that you're creating with the people around you. So I'm more convinced of this than ever. I continue to say this, but authentic leadership and creating compelling cultures and clarity around mission, vision, and values is so key to being effective and to be a compelling culture. That's what it requires. So glad to be able to be talking about these things and to be supporting people in this kind of way. So if you'll do me a favor before we launch into today's episode, real quickly, if you will just rate the podcast 5 stars, of course. If you'll just take 30 seconds, if you'll do this, if you'll leave a nice positive review, those ways is how the algorithms help amplify it and share it with more and more people. So thank you for everybody that does that. I can't make it spread, so you all are the ones that help it spread. And then obviously also to share it with people in your network, in your life, your work that ought to be listening to some of these episodes. Again, we've got over 125 now, so there's so many great things out there and ideas that will hopefully contribute and add value, and it's all free, so share away. And certainly share on social media or wherever is authentic for you. So thanks to everybody that does that. We've been talking about all that's been happening in the world over the last 2 years and then connecting it to leadership and culture and making sure that then we know that navigating our way through all the changes and uncertainty and challenges that people have been facing over the last 2 years, that's real for us as human beings. It's real for us as teams. It's real for companies to be trying to navigate that in the midst of so much that feels out of our control in the world. And yet we always bring ourselves back to what is within our control, and that our thinking, our acting, and interacting related to leadership and culture is where we need to put our focus, and then be able to, that will help us more effectively navigate the uncertainty and the changes and the challenges, the things we can't control, based on the understanding of the temperature that we're trying to set and the things that are within our control. And so today's podcast will just be an extension of that, and we'll continue to talk about how we're all hopefully aiming to do that. All of us imperfect, none of us have it all figured out, but to continue to grow and develop in this way is really, really important. So on today's podcast, we are going to be taking a look at some of the work trends for 2022 that were identified by Forbes and the Harvard Business Review and other future of work strategists. And not only are we going to look at the predictions and the trends that they had, but I'm going to provide my mid-year observations on these trends across industries and what we're seeing happening based on these trends and predictions that they talked about and they identified. So more to come on today's episode. But let's take a break. Let's take a pause for a second, and we'll be right back. Quick break, and then we'll be right back with today's episode. Many teams and organizations right now are realizing that they need to do both. They need to engage the minds and hearts of their people in person, where everyone in the room can experience the energy of congregating together and find clarity for the road ahead. And they also need to continue to find ways to engage the minds and hearts of their people virtually, with those who are working remotely or at a distance. So, if you are in the process of planning your next team meeting, company all-hands event, conference or culture summit, and are looking for support with a powerful keynote speech, facilitated team conversations that are the currency for change, or deeper development on leadership mindset and an intentional strategy for the culture you're trying to create, I hope you'll contact us at jasonvbarger.com, jasonvbarger.com. It is my privilege and our honor to partner with great people to provide support in these areas. We want to breathe oxygen into your leaders and throughout your organization so you can set the temperature you want for your culture. We look forward to connecting with you soon. We're talking about 2022 work trends today, and more importantly, we're taking a step back to see how these trends are playing out within organizations. From my observations on developing leaders, authentic cultures, and clarity on mission, vision, and values. So coming into 2022, all the places we're doing this, but the few that I'm going to highlight today, places like Forbes, the Harvard Business Review, and a couple of future of work kind of strategists chimed in with their predictions and trends for HR and workforces for the year ahead and beyond, but they were focused on kind of 2022. What are the HR and future of work kind of trends that they were predicting for 2022 and beyond? And so I'm going to take a look at some of these predictions. Now, everybody had their own different list of top 10 this, top 7 this, top 11 this. So I've kind of looked at some of the key common themes that rang throughout these different lists that places were putting out and picked a few that seemed to be on everybody's lists. And so I'm just going to highlight those quickly today. So let's take a look at some of the predictions and then I'll provide my own commentary and my own observations of what I'm seeing, what I'm experiencing, what I'm seeing across industries with all the teams and organizations and companies that I'm lucky to support and help with kind of the development of their people, their culture, and that clarity of mission, vision, and values. So we'll start out with this one. Forbes is number one. This was the number one thing they pointed out. The future, they said the future of work is employee well-being. The future of work is employee well-being. And they define this from a broad sense. So if all you think about in your head is well-being, meaning every place is just going to have a fitness studio or gym, that may be part of it, but that's not the picture of employee well-being. The future of work is employee well-being, and they took a broader focus on employee well-being being this. Emotional well-being was the first thing they named, that the future of work is about emotional well-being. It's about financial well-being and supporting their people that way. It's about social well-being. How do they fit in, not just socially outside of work, but socially internally within teams and organizations? And then also career wellness. Are they in a position to be able to be developed and grown and supported that way as they grow? So the number one thing they predicted and named for 2022 and beyond is that the future of work is employee well-being, with that broad focus of kind of emotional well-being, financial well-being, social well-being, inside and outside of work, of course, but inside the walls of our work, which we're going to talk about related to culture shaping today, and career wellness. So they specifically, in these findings, they name company culture and relationships at work as critical to the future of work, of Again, if well-being is tied to your emotional well-being and your social well-being in between the walls and outside of the walls, then the company culture and the relationships at work are really important. They specifically named coaching and support and training and development as key factors in engaging with their employees and helping them develop all of these things around emotional well-being, financial well-being, social well-being, and then also helping them develop so that they are more attractive for that future career and the wellness for the career that they're wanting to have. And all these things they identified as kind of key factors as engaging with employees. My observations, absolutely. Absolutely. The best teams and organizations that I'm observing and watching and also, again, trends and research that I'm watching and that I'm experiencing personally, the best teams and organizations are taking a holistic view of the people in their organization and are proactively. It doesn't mean they're perfect. Again, I'm yet to find a perfect leader, perfect team, perfect organization, but they're taking the mindset of looking at it holistically, and then they are proactively committed, which means they are invested. They're invested with their time, they're invested with their dollars, they're invested with their people in creating a culture that honors well-being in many forms. So if we want a culture that helps with emotional well-being or financial well-being and social well-being and career wellness, then we've got to create a culture. And that means we have to be proactive about planning things that will engage people and provide resources and support to people in all of those areas. A second trend that seemed to show up on many lists was employees seek companies whose values match their own. Employees, especially in the midst of the great resignation that we've talked about many times on this podcast, what are people seeking? And I've shared statistics in the past about what people are looking for. This prediction and that they identified was employees seek companies whose values match their own. So related, of course, to that first one, Forbes research says that 75 to 80% of workers want to be, they want to be a part of a company that is a force for good in society. They want to be a part of a company. 75 to 80% say, I want to be a part of a company that is kind of a force for good in society and that also have values that are compelling to me personally and the team members around me, and that the values seem like they are alive. You've heard me talk about just not just having posters on the wall, not posters, but which we should have posters, but not only posters. Are our posters actually in our people? Are they alive? Is the oxygen we're breathing? Is it values based and connected to something that we're trying to do together that we can't do on our own? They mentioned the need for continuous listening programs and collaborative development. My observation with this one is people want to be heard. People want, again, you've heard me back to the main point, is that people are seeking companies whose values match their own. Absolutely. Where are all these people jumping, the great resignation? Once ultimately when all things are about equal, what are they looking for? The research is saying they're looking for a more meaningful culture, a place that matches their own personal values and helps them develop and where they feel like they're cared for. So that is obvious. Then I'll say that people want to be heard. People want to be participants in the creation of your unique cup of coffee. You've heard me use that phrase before, is that they want to share in the creation of your culture. And so the power of listening campaigns that I've helped organizations think about and then begin to implement, to listen to your people, to facilitate processes and listening campaigns so that we can extract what is it that we're feeling and what is it that people are wanting. And then not just by democracy, but then as collective power and ownership of saying, okay, well, what are we going to create together? So proactive leadership development that is rooted in your values. They named that as an important thing. Well, what I talk about with teams and organizations is what we don't need is just a program off the shelf, that you think is a one-size-fits-all for everybody, that most places need to tailor their leadership development programs in order to be authentic for your values and for the company and the culture that you're trying to create. And so oftentimes when I'm collaborating with teams and organizations, we're doing exactly that. We're designing a emerging leader program or an executive program or a manager program of development that is anchored in their company values, and how is it that we can tailor it, because that's what's going to be authentic and genuine. So it's about collaborative culture shaping that is deliberate and intentional across the company. So again, this is where we anchor it with how we hire, how we onboard, how we do emerging leader programs or managers, executive leaders, the messages that we anchor at the all-hands summits that we do. All of these things matter and are really important, and I see that trend continuing to gain steam and just be needed, frankly, because it's related to this next one, where they say hybrid work is here to stay. Hybrid work is here to stay. Now, of course, we know there are places that, if you're a frontline person or something where, or you're in an industry where you have to be on the job, of course, that those kind of things are going to continue, at least seemingly. But a lot of places are realizing that hybrid work is here to stay, meaning there will be some in-person work and a combination of remote and virtual or distant work. So studies show that many employees prefer some form of hybrid work environment. The Harvard Business Review and Forbes, they report that 83% of employees prefer a hybrid work environment, which is a monster number. They say, their research says that 83% of people saying, yeah, I kind of prefer a hybrid work environment. Again, we know that there are people that like one size or the other, but they're saying for the most part that 83% kind of like a combination of that hybrid. And that they also say that 63% of high growth companies have adopted what they call a, quote, productivity anywhere workforce model. So my observations with this is, yes, hybrid is here to stay in many places. The pandemic, of course, caused what I referred to, and you've heard me say, forced innovation, that allowed teams to look at their effectiveness and really be forced to find new ways to do things. And so they had to, do some more remote stuff and virtual stuff in ways that they had never done before. And many remote workers, as we've learned, became actually more efficient and effective during, that, and that they actually really came alive during that kind of opportunity to work remotely and virtual, and some that was really efficient and effective. We also know that others really struggled. And so it isn't a one-size-fits-all thing. We know that teams and organizations are right now, and I notice this and my observations are negotiating that very same thing right now. But the important thing is what authentically works best for your team, for your organization. And to be listening and talking about what is that model that embraces the very best of hybrid, the very best of remote and in person kind of work, and it's going to be the teams and organizations that authentically embrace a model that allows for a combination of remote and in person working experiences. As I've said all along, also there will always be power in congregation. There will always be power in congregation. And I'm seeing places realize this, that the real danger in too much remote or distant work is that connections are lost and the human touch, the human reality gets lost. So hybrid might be here to stay, but it means many places are going to be challenged to be even more intentional about planning deliberate in-person gatherings for culture shaping, for connection, for storytelling and messaging so that messages don't get lost in translation. And also, as getting better, we're also going to have to get better at leading and engaging remote virtual sessions. I've done a whole podcast on that. We've got to get better at doing those because that's going to be here to stay in some ways. And so we have to be able to do both and be really intentional and deliberate about both. We can't just divide and scatter and expect to stay aligned. That's what I would say. We can't just divide and scatter and quote unquote, you go do your job and I'll do mine and think that we're going to stay in alignment. That isn't realistic. And so we're going to have to be more intentional and deliberate about creating that power of congregation in person and then getting better at doing those remote virtual connections with each other so that we can stay engaged in the work together. The last one I'll just focus on for today is the number one challenge that they named. This is looking even further out than 2022. They said the number one challenge facing heads of learning, people that are in learning and development, the number one challenge of facing heads of learning in 2025, their prediction by Forbes is building a culture of lifelong learning. That's going to be the biggest challenge they're facing is building a culture of lifelong learning. And this came from a survey that they did of many HR and learning officers across industries that were asked to pick the top 3 challenges that they're facing and that they think are going to be facing the heads of learning in 2025, so looking out into the future. And they said building a culture of lifelong learning was the number one answer. That was 44% of the people surveyed said that. That was number 1. Upskilling learning and development professionals. So helping learning and development professionals kind of upskill was second at 40%. And having a plan to drive innovation in learning and development came in third at 37%. My observation and commentary on this is that all of this is connected to that hybrid environment that we were just talking about. We're going to have to be even more intentional and deliberate about leading a culture of lifelong learning. It won't just magically happen. It won't just magically happen on its own, which means leaders, teams, and organizations are going to have to prioritize it and then lead and develop it so that we, again, don't scatter and divide, but we're going to have to be really intentional about how we are helping people develop, naming it as a part of the culture that we are creating, and then we're going to have to go do it. So what I'll lastly say about all of these trends, all of these trends or all the predictions that I've read is that if we don't do these things, the danger is if we don't do these things within our teams and organizations is all the data and research is telling us that people will go somewhere else. So if you're listening to this and you're saying, well, I don't want to do these things or this, whatever, we don't have time for that. We got to just get back to work and get to the business of our work. Well, okay. But data and research is going to show you that eventually when we don't do these things, people will go somewhere else, where they will go somewhere where they feel like they engage, feel like they matter, feel like they are being developed, and feel like they're cared for. So this week, some questions for you to ponder. What are you and your team doing to promote well-being and collective culture shaping? What are you and your team doing to promote well-being and collective culture shaping? What can be done intentionally to engage remote workers and that hybrid environment? And how will you help embrace a culture of lifelong learning on your team? We all breathe in energy into our habits every day, either good, helpful energy, or negative, toxic air that makes it harder to breathe. These positive habits help us breathe in good air. So what is it that we're breathing into ourselves and to our people? And remembering as we try to calibrate our own personal thermostat for our own awareness, our own response, we know that calibrating our personal awareness and our social awareness is about being able to realize what are those things that I want to put out into the world. What are those habits that I'm forming? And what is that temperature that I want to set? We are the thermostats. Our own internal temperature sets a temperature externally for others based on our own response and our own behaviors. So I hope you'll keep tuning in. I hope this was a good episode. It gave you a little look at maybe the trends that are happening right now in the world. And we've got more great episodes ahead that are going to help support your vision and our mindset on being an authentic leader in the world and creating compelling cultures. Remember, the best leaders, teams, and cultures on the planet stimulate progress by recalibrating their thermostat together. Thank you for listening to today's podcast, and I hope the messages and questions stimulate positive change along your path. As always, if these messages resonate with you and add value to your life, I hope you'll help amplify them throughout the world. Please rate, comment, and share on whatever podcast or social media platform you're using, and share this podcast with the people in your life or work who should be part of these conversations. That way, this spirit does, in fact, spread. If these messages or developing leaders and culture would be helpful to you and your organization, please contact us at jasonvbarger.com, jasonvbarger.com. And remember, we are all ambassadors for the culture we want to create in our life and work. We have to own the vision we want to be a part of. The future of leadership is you, is me, is us. Be a thermostat.